Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Whether this is your first time here or you're a returning subscriber, I appreciate that you've come to spend some time with me and my channel. My name is Penny and this is Little by Little. So in this video we're going to take a tour of the last room of the Homestead house, and that is the porch. Now I've made a few things for the porch, and I've also collected a few things that I've picked up over the past couple of years in anticipation for making the porch. So I'm excited to see it all put together. It is a very narrow space, and it is really difficult to get my camera in there in a landscape view, just because, you know, there's this much space. So I think a lot of it at the end is probably going to be more pictures than video. And part of the reason for that is that when I put my camera on video, it automatically zooms in, which makes, in some cases, things are just too close and you're only getting a fraction of the piece instead of the whole piece. So I hope you don't mind that a lot of it is going to be pictures, but I think that you'll probably still get the effect of what I was looking for, and hopefully you'll enjoy the tour. Now this is in no way the end of the Homestead house. I still have lots to do. I still have to make a ceiling, I have to do the electrical, I have to build a roof, and I have to do some landscaping. But first I have to put some curtains on the windows. So that's all still coming up in this series. And once all that is done, then I'm going to move on to a new project and we'll just kind of start the whole process over. But more about that at another time. Let's get into the Homestead porch, and I hope you enjoy it. I want to start with the workbench that we made in the last video. So this one is going to contain a couple of different things. I have, first of all, a little toolbox. This is the little mini that I bought from AliExpress, and I'll show you the tools that came with it. But first I want to glue this to the top of the workbench. So it's just going to sit on the bench kind of like that. Obviously it doesn't need to be straight, or I don't want it to be straight. So since both pieces are made out of wood, I'm just going to use some wood glue. While we're waiting for that to dry, here are the tools that came with this little set. So we have a little crescent wrench, a screwdriver, a hammer, this little saw, a pair of wire snips, another wrench, and a pair of pliers. And these are actually kind of fun because they actually open, which is kind of neat. And they're just going to sit in these slots. And some of them I'll put tool side up just so that you can see what they are. And then there's others that it just makes sense to put it tool side down. And then I also have this other hammer. I'm not even sure where it came from, but I'm going to include that in that toolbox as well. Next, I'm going to add these magazines that I made. And so all I did for these was I went into Google Images and just looked up vintage Popular Mechanics covers, printed them out, and then just filled them with paper. I also have a Popular Electronics. This is very old, it's quite vintage, so I think it will probably work with the time period. There was electricity in the house by the time I started going out to the farm, and perhaps my uncle was interested in putting electricity in some other buildings, or even just updating in the house. So those three magazines are going to sit on the shelf underneath the toolbox down here. So I'm going to glue them together, just kind of like they are here, and then we'll glue the whole bottom piece onto the shelf. I also made these little boxes of soap and starch that would have been used with the wash tub and the washboard. And they're going to sit underneath the shelf on this side. On the top, I've made these little guys. Now, my grandma was a gardener. She had a huge garden on the farm, as I'm sure most farms do. And I was able to find these little seed packet printables online that you just had to cut out and fold them up and glue them together. And I filled them with sugar beads. Now, if you're not familiar with what sugar beads are, it looks like sugar, but of course it's artificial. But when you shake them, you can actually hear what's inside. So it kind of gives the illusion that there's actual seeds in there. I also made this very basic little box to put the seed packets into, and I'm actually going to glue them in there because I don't want them to all fall out and spill if I accidentally move the box, which I'm very likely going to do. So I'm just going to put a little bit of glue on the bottom of the box to start. We're just going to glue the bottom edges into the box. So I have a couple of larger packets. So those are going to just go at the back. So some beets and some tomatoes. So those will just sit at the back like that. And then all of the other smaller vegetables will sit in front of those packets. So start with just one side. Some cabbage. Some more beets. Seem to be quite popular. Some radishes. So just by gluing down the bottoms to the bottom of the box, I can still kind of maneuver them a little bit and have a look through if I wanted to. But those are going to sit over on this side of the workbench. A couple of other items that I was lucky enough to find from AliExpress is this little butter churn, which my grandmother definitely used. I distinctly remember her making butter in the kitchen. So I have that, and then I have this little milk can as well, which will sit, I think, beside the milk separator. Seems like the logical place for it. And for the shelf above the workbench, I made these little cans. They're just made out of some wood dowel, but I've written on them different things that you would find, I guess, in a workshop. So I have some nuts and bolts, some small nails, some small screws, large nails, large screws, and some washers. And I thought those might be things that he would like to have handy in the house in case he had to do some sort of minor house repair or something even that he just needed to keep handy so he knew where it was. So those are going to sit up on that little shelf above the bench. Next, I made this little hanger. It's just a piece of wood and some nails, and that's going to hang behind the door. And on it I'm going to hang this little shovel and this little pitchfork. So that'll sit behind the door and kind of out of the way. And then I have a second hanger for a work apron. And this I bought actually from a scrapbook store. It's part of the scrapbook embellishments, but I think it works really well. And so it'll hang on one side. And then I also have a little jacket that came with the doll that I'll be using to represent my uncle. Now, obviously, if I just left it the way it was, it's not going to hang properly. So I'm going to have to actually go in with some fabric glue and glue it down so that it looks like it's hanging naturally. And so you do that just by taking in little folds. And I'll just apply some glue within the folds. I have some clamps I can use to keep it held down until the glue dries. And it will basically sit kind of like this, making sure that, of course, I have the peak at the top so that it sits up on the nail and it looks like it hangs fairly naturally. And then the last thing that I have is this little wash tub and washboard, which is all glued together. I thought about taking it apart and hanging the washboard on the wall, but honestly, I kind of like it just the way it is. So that will sit either underneath the workbench or perhaps out on the front porch, depending on whether it's wash day or not.